So Google decided that a global pandemic and core updates that randomly push your rankings up and down without really understanding why was not enough for us to deal with. So they decided to roll out a new algorithm update that specifically targets product reviews and roundup reviews. But the good news is that they gave us a blog post to tell us exactly what we should have in our reviews for them to keep ranking. Thank you, Google. So in this episode, Mark and I are going to go over that blog post that they gave us and tell you in plain English what we think of it and what we think you should do to your website so you can keep ranking high for review terms. But before we get started, I have a quick announcement to make. Authority Hacker Pro, our best and most advanced training with over 300 over-the-shoulder videos, is back for enrollment this week only. So if you enjoyed my last video on site structure or the live stream I did on keyword research or a lot of the content we released in the podcast, think about that times 1,000 inside Authority Hacker Pro. Plus inside Authority Hacker Pro, you also get our copy and paste templates, our SOPs, and access to our advanced communities with a lot of people killing it with Authority websites. So if you want to learn more about it and join today, go on authorityhacker.com/pro and we'll see you inside. But hurry up because it is only open this week and after that we are not going to be reopening it for a while. Now that the announcement is done, let's get started with the episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Authority Hacker Podcast. If you don't remember, we are actually now only releasing an episode every 2 weeks, but you're lucky because this week is one of these 2 weeks. And before we jump into the podcast, even though we're doing the podcast every 2 weeks, we don't forget the traditions. So how's it going, Mark?
It's going good. I would say stressful is maybe a better adjective to use. Anytime we do a launch for AH Pro, it only happens like twice a year. We have to get it right because like the slightest thing on the sales page and we can lose like tens of thousands of dollars. So yeah, busy week this week, getting everything in line for that.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm kind of like, it's like we've done it a few times now. So I'm okay. I'm more excited to like see who's going to join, like see what they're doing, etc. There's always like some cool people joining. So I'm looking forward to see what they do, etc. But anyway, let's jump onto the podcast because the podcast is going to be something that interests a lot of people because Google has released an update. But unlike most of the updates they have done in the past few months/years, they actually gave us some information this time. So we tend to not be huge fans of commenting on updates when really there's nothing to comment about. Some sites went up, some sites went down. There's nothing objective to say about why they went up or down. But in this case, Google gave us some stuff to talk about and analyze and think about. And so whether you went up or down in this update, I think we're going to have some interesting insight that we can share here. And we are going to be talking about an update that particularly touches the people that follow us because it is touching product reviews, roundup reviews, not just single reviews, but pretty much anything related to talking about products online in terms of content. And essentially Google's like, well, guys, you got to pick your shit up and do proper reviews. That's the nutshell version of it. And essentially he's trying to reward people who are doing a good job rather than like penalize people who do a bad job as per the wording of their blog post. But let's dive a little bit into this. Well, just give me what happened. What happened, Mark?
Okay, so a couple weeks ago, and I'm not sure how related this is, but a couple weeks ago, Google came out with something called Best Things, which everyone was sort of talking about. I just wanted to address that first because it kind of plays into this. So I'm not sure exactly how related it is, but basically Google had a sort of mini site full of different products. And the way this was positioned in their PR release was that this is the only place you need to go to find the best anything for anything. And that was bullshit. It really wasn't. The press release and the reality was almost like completely different. It was just a glorified Google shopping page, which had some like extra kind of reviewed content, which had been like scraped and pulled in from other sources. And if the product wasn't on Google Shopping, then the product wasn't there. So no way this could be the best anything for anything. I think it's just a way of Google's trying to sort of cash in on reviews in some way, maybe use their market position to put their own site first, even though it was like super thin review. Like you wouldn't go to any of these pages and get an objective opinion about what was whether the product was good or not, which is surprising then that a week later they come out with this update.
Yes.
Let's call it the product reviews update, or affiliate reviews update might be a better term. I'm not sure. and they're basically come up with all these criteria about what makes a good product review. And there's a lot of stuff on there you're probably doing already. But this is just really like clarifying, although, some of the sections raise more questions than they really answer, but they're really trying to push down your throat that you can't just be rewriting the manufacturer's sales page, regurgitating a few things, maybe linking it to a benefit here and there, and calling that a review and being expected to be competitive with other people who are maybe taking it a bit more seriously and putting in more effort. So I imagine whoever's sort of organizing this on Google then has a pretty tough time trying to ascertain or determine which sites are doing a good job in these different factors and which ones aren't, because it's somewhat subjective whether a review is good or not. And I think that'd be very difficult to kind of police algorithmically. So I think they're probably trying to start defining some criteria by which to judge review content. And so this will be, in my estimation, a continuing thing that develops as time goes on.
Most kind of like new ranking factors they introduce, right? They tend to be very minor and actually don't matter that much. I mean, some people obviously saw movements, but also a lot of people didn't see movements with this update. So considering the amount of people that we know that have review sites, it's like actually quite a small number of people that seem to be affected compared to the amount of people it could have affected.
So I will say that it affected one of our sites in a positive way. It was up about 30 something % in traffic.
This weekend,
but it was actually up even more in revenue because the keywords and whatever that was being affected were predominantly commercial, monetary ones, not so much like info content. So
like the ad revenue went up pretty much exactly 30%, whereas affiliate revenue went up quite a bit more. Yeah. So that was quite interesting. Before we keep going with that, just because I know we're going to close this, so I wanted to talk quickly about this best thing site from Google. I know people went crazy when this, I was on Facebook groups, people GG, game over, that's it, Google's gonna take all the review keywords and no affiliate site's gonna show up, etc. But it's like for that site that went up, actually, when you Google best keywords, etc., very often, for example, Google will show actually a carousel of products, and when you click on it, then what it's going to do is going to search for the product name and essentially show single reviews for that product, right? And I was checking on that site, this besting site, for the same product category, and essentially it's exactly what's in a carousel that was showing up for the best in a product category. And I actually believe this site was built from features that were already in search. So they're just pulling stuff that existed already inside google.com when you were searching, and they just put it as a website pretty much. Rather than essentially Google starting to enter that market. I don't think they're going to try to rank organically. I think they will still do what they do, which is show up like a product carousel. So for example, if you Google best SEO tools, for example, you will also have a top carousel, and you see like SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz, blah, 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 etc. And then essentially you can click on one of them, and then it's going to Google that query. So it's going to Google SEMrush or Ahrefs or something like this, and then their site's going to show up on top. Not great for affiliates, but that's something that's been around for a while. So it feels like it's more like the other way around than what people think. It's like this site was built from stuff that was already in search, and just like they put it together as a website, rather than like Google entered magically the review space with their own site. And to be honest, I was checking that site on Ahrefs. It's reporting 57 traffic on Ahrefs right now, so it's not something I would worry very much about. It ranks for like a really weird keywords, not even any random preview keyword or anything like that. So I wouldn't be worried. There's not much original content as well. I don't think Google would favor their site. I know they would tend to do that, but given all the antitrust stuff that's going on, etc., I would imagine that they would probably try to avoid that kind of bad PR these days. And I don't think it's worth the price for them compared to how much money they make with ads to put themselves in that kind of situation and risk an antitrust, even more arguments in the antitrust against them. So that's basically my parenthesis on this one. I'm not very worried about this best things site. Now let's go back to the update.
Yeah, so on Thursday, 8th of April, they released this product reviews update. I think they're calling it. And there's a fair amount of text. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So if you're watching on YouTube, we'll flash up the the various parts on the screen as we're talking about them. But basically, they're saying, Google's trying to make search helpful and useful through testing, blah, blah, blah. And then the second sentence, which is quite strong, said, from this, we know people appreciate product reviews that share in-depth research rather than thin content that simply summarizes a bunch of products. Now, I actually got quite excited when I first read this. And I'm thinking, oh, finally, they've sort of cracked on to what's going on here. And I'm looking mostly at the big publishers like newspapers and stuff kind of cashing in on their
Forbes
DR to write reviews about anything and everything that's on Amazon or that they can get an affiliate link for. And although it's well written in the sense that, from an editorial perspective, it's correct.
Grammatically correct. Grammatically correct.
Yeah, and that stuff is fine. Obviously, I mean, you expect that. But the recommendations they're making and the thoroughness of their analysis leaves a lot to be desired. Yet they're still beating, or they were still beating at least a lot of smaller sites who put in, some more effort to actually research the products properly. Just because these big sites had high DR and could kind of outrank them on that alone. So I was thinking, like, hopefully this is going to correct that imbalance and the best review shall win, which is kind of what it should be, or almost at least.
Yeah, I spent some time on Google this weekend. That's not what I've noticed. It's like these sites are still here, So far, it's once again, that's what we said. It's like usually new factors tend to be very minor, and then they kind of like amplify it with time. So fingers crossed, this is one of those.
It's worth pointing out as we record this, we're going on a week into this. So and it said it's going to take a couple of weeks to roll out. I believe they may have mentioned that on Twitter. So it could still change. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, let's see. I'm not having big hopes, but I like that they're looking at it. Let's just say that. But like for me, what I was thinking as well is like, like Forbes is the perfect example, right? It's like, Matt Diggity made a video on the topic as well, and he made a joke in there that said like, oh, Forbes the world's expert on pillows or something like that, because they rank for like best pillows or something, which is true. It's like you shouldn't have to read Forbes when you want to buy a pillow. It just makes no sense. Forbes is not a site where you would read for pillows, and they need to stop being like, Google needs to stop making sites rank for everything. I think that's the thing as well. They need to kind of categorize more, the same way they do on YouTube, for example. But what I liked about this is that these big publishers, they really can half-ass that content and rank for big keywords. They do intro, list of 10 products with like a shitty blurb on each of them, and then a link to Amazon, and a conclusion. There's no comparisons, there's no nothing, there's no whatever. And then they rank top 5 or something, and they make a bunch of money. Whereas if Google actually pushes this kind of agenda more, where they require more insider content, it's going to be much harder for these websites to essentially do this kind of content at the scale at which they're doing it right now. And at least it's going to essentially specialize people who are really good at reviews and reward them for being really good at reviews, while people who create more generic content just tend to be not as good, like ranked not as well, basically. Why are you laughing?
I'm just laughing at how many times you say essentially again. Like 3 times in that last sentence.
Yeah, I was watching some other videos I did, and I do the same thing. So yeah, I believe you. But yeah, but it's going to be rewarding people who get better reviews, provided this update has a strong enough impact, I believe. And it's going to reward you if you really get to know your product category as well.
I would also say that, we've worked with quite a lot of writers across various different sites and loads of niches over the years. And I feel like, the average writer you're going to hire has pretty low expectations about what quality levels they're going to try and output at. So if you give them a keyword, they'll just go away, research it. They'll actually read a few articles and kind of rewrite various parts of all of them into one, while at the same time looking at the product description and pulling in a few things there, and then sort of call it a day. And there's no real kind of emphasis to really understand what the best product is and to question what's already out there and make something better. And it's something we've really been trying to do a lot of across all of our sites. and really teach in a lot of the updates which we've done for the authority site system and AH Pro, which, another shout out, is on sale at the moment. We've really been trying to push like content quality above everything else, because I believe that it is the single biggest differentiator of what's going to make your site successful or not in the long run, particularly for affiliate reviews, for affiliate sites. And so, I mean, just to sort of like get back to what they're saying as well, though, it's actually only applying to English language at the moment, which is normal. It's how they do most updates, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to roll out to German and Spanish next year or in the not too distant future. And they're saying, we believe this will help those producing rich content in the product reviews area. No shit. Then we get into the real kind of juicy part. So they're saying, although it's separate from their regular core updates, the advice they provide around producing quality content is the same. Okay, we already know that. But the overall focus is on providing users with content which provides insightful analysis and original research and is written by experts or enthusiasts who know the topic well. Now, first read over that, I was thinking experts. Does that mean EAT is actually a thing, and we need to solve that? But it's interesting they say it was written by experts or enthusiasts. So they're maybe positioning that as you don't actually have to be a pillow expert in order to write it. You just need to be enthusiastic about pillows and sleep, perhaps. Which actually to me says that they're kind of broadening the scope of who can be writing these things to just about anyone, as long as you.
Yeah, I think it's always been like that, though. Like, there's no degree on pillows, Like, I don't have a PhD in pillow fillings, But like, what they mean basically is that if I ask you what are the pros and cons of different pillow fillings, and if you're writing with that article, you should be able to tell me. So, for example, like duck down is good because it doesn't get too hot or too cold, whereas the other one is like more firm if you're using like foam, etc. It maintains your neck better if you have back problems. So, if you're able to have that kind of discussion, that's what qualifies you as an enthusiast, I think. And you don't need to have a degree or paper that proves that you know that stuff. Just like if you know, It's like, and I think that's always been what Google's expected, except for YMYL stuff when it's like, like financial advice, medical advice, etc. Then it's not just like, I've read the encyclopedia on natural remedies, so I can qualify on heart attack advice, So like that's when it's a bit more touchy, but like every other topic, which is most of consumer topics, right? There's no degrees on consumer goods. And that's what enthusiast is. It's like, can you understand different attributes of a product and explain them? Like, why when you buy a laptop, do you need 8 or 16 gigs of RAM? Or why do you need a fast SSD versus a mechanical hard drive? And in which situations do you want each, et cetera, et cetera? When you're selling laptops, that's the kind of stuff that you should be able to have as a discussion. If you can, you probably qualify to write about the topic,
There's the first part of that sentence is also, I think, quite interesting. It's like focusing on providing users with content that provides insightful analysis and original research. They also mentioned earlier something about share in-depth research rather than thin content that simply summarizes a bunch of products. I think you can sort of pull all that into one discussion point. And there are actually affiliate programs out there that will provide you with pre-written kind of reviews or bits of text for your review, content for review that you can just kind of like copy paste, almost like a swipe email, but for
you can spin it,
for reviews. Yeah. And there are sites that do that and somehow get away with it. I don't know. I didn't know that was kind of a thing, but this is just really emphasizing that you've got to go beyond just rewriting the manufacturer's description here.
I agree, but you know what kind of like made me irk a bit at this is the like original research part. I agree that it's a good thing. It's probably good for like getting links as well. Usually when we do original research on a post, people tend to link to it more. But given the way Google works with all that search intent stuff, etc., I was quite surprised in that they were. I mean, obviously it makes sense that they would want that. But technically, how Google works these days is they're looking for like essentially pages that are considered the best pages on the topic, and they're like looking at how close you are to these pages, while maybe being more concise, things like that, etc. And so it was a bit interesting to see them talk about this original research, because it's really something that I feel has been lacking in terms of creating content for Google these days, which is like you need to do this Me Too content to rank for a lot of queries. And so I'm curious to see how that would translate in real life. Like I'm curious of like how much of this is aspiration versus actual technical stuff that would make you rank, you know? Because Google is known for that. You know, when they talk about an update, they tell you what they would like it to be, but they don't necessarily tell you how they actually do this technically. And I feel like I'm like, okay, how are you gonna actually do that and reward original research on like a low DR? If a low DR site does original research, like really, really good research, versus if a high DR site just makes a shitty Me Too review, how are you gonna reward that? You know, and from what I've Googled so far, I you know, it's only like manual queries on like, you know, 20 queries, maybe something like this. So it's not insight on like large data, etc. But like I haven't seen that very much, to be honest. So I'd be curious to see what they do here, and I'm a little bit doubtful as well.
So the main meat and bones of the post that Google put up was this list of, I think it was like 9 or 10 bullet points about things you should consider if you're writing a product review. And I want to just sort of go through them all one by one, and we can kind of like talk around it and address it, and maybe pull in some examples of who might use this or how this might affect certain reviews. And I'm sure we can think of some cool paintball analogies for this as well.
Yeah,
it's
like it's for the bingo of the podcast, you know.
So the first one was that do your reviews express expert knowledge about products where appropriate? This is somewhat vague when they say expert knowledge, especially because they previously said earlier in the post, expert or enthusiast. So now they're going just with expert knowledge, although it's where it's appropriate.
Well, the knowledge is expert, not the person, you know?
But what makes someone an expert, or what makes knowledge expert knowledge? Like, expert's a really subjective term, and it would be hard to define that. I mean, do you need to know more than the average person not searching for this, or the average person who's reading the review, or the average person who knows about the product? Like, where do you draw?
Or do you need to just be delusioned enough to think you're an expert? You know?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's bullshit. Basically, basically it says you should probably know about advanced. You should know about your product category, I believe. That's what it means. It's like you should understand attributes of your product category.
Which leads me to think, are there people out there that are writing reviews that don't know anything about their product category?
Yes.
If so, how?
100%. Like Google, like Best Blender and things like that, and go on these big publisher sites, you will see that the writer has no freaking idea about what they're writing about.
I think it's sort of like when do you ever ask friends and family for a recommendation for something?
It's always terrible.
And it's almost universally bad because they don't know how, they don't have a big sample size, or they don't know how to ascertain whether something or someone is good or bad. And you're always left like, oh, actually, I definitely not going to do that because it's not convincing. I think it's like the same sort of phenomenon there, as like sometimes people are just writing reviews in order to, like, because they have a juicing website, they have to review all the blenders when actually they've never used one and have no idea whether it's good or not.
It's not even that. It's just like these are writers on payroll for Forbes, or like freelancers. You know, there's like Forbes probably has their own like in-house writing system with a pool of writers, etc., and they just pick up articles. And the guy just, you know, has to complete 20 a week or something, and he's just like, okay, blenders are great because you can blend things in it. And you can make a soup, or you can make something cold with it, and it makes things in smaller pieces. If you add water, it's great. And here's Blender 1, Blender 2, Blender 3. We write the description for Amazon. Oh, I hope you found the great blender from our review. Make sure to check also our best juicers and our best blah, blah, blah with internal links. And that's it. And again, he knows absolutely nothing. He just opened 10 Amazon links. He went in the Blender category on Amazon. He filtered by star ratings. He picked the top 10 products. And he wrote a filler intro and outro, and we wrote what he saw in the product description without knowing anything, right? That's what's happening in content farms. And I think it's a good thing that this should not be rewarded, you know?
To me, what this is saying is that you need to understand what makes a good product in whatever category it is you're writing about. So the what makes a good juicer section of your best juicers, or how to pick a juicer section. When you're researching that, you're kind of learning and understanding what makes a good one, and then you can apply these same criteria and kind of learnings to all of your juicer reviews across your juicer site.
To each product as well. Like,
yeah.
And that's when you can like segment them, right? It's like, oh, this one is the easiest to clean. This one actually like extracts the most juice per kilo of veggies, or this one actually, is the like slowest one, so you get more vitamins out of it or something. And then that's when you can do these kind of reviews. So, but yeah, the thing is like you cannot write 20 reviews a week in 20 different product categories when you essentially go on that level, which is going to be a big problem for large publishers that are trying to cover every category here. They either need to enlarge the pool of people they have and give them more time and budget, or they'll need to cut back on how wide they go,
It's also a reason to hire specialist topic expert writers rather than general writers who write about lots of different topics, because the quality and preciseness of what they're writing about tends to not be so good. Let's move on to the next point. So, next one is that your review should show what the products are like physically or how it's used, with unique content beyond what's provided by the manufacturer. So there's a couple things here. I think on the one hand, if you're showing what it's like physically, that could be an image or a video that you're creating. Now that raises the whole question of, do you need to have the product in hand and take photos yourself of it? I certainly think that if everyone else in the SERP is doing that, then you're probably going to be quite limited if you're not. But if no one else is, then someone still has to rank. So I would hesitate to start spending lots of money on photographing and doing product in hand stuff unless it's kind of essential for that niche, that keyword.
Or you just want to go on that level of quality for your site. Like, I think sometimes it makes sense on an editorial level to try to go on that level. And sometimes when the niche is very competitive and you want to go like super clean, then that's one thing to do, So I'm not saying you shouldn't say you shouldn't do this. You should just say like, if you don't have to do this, but it can make sense if that's what you want to do with your site and if that's your business plan,
And I think they're just kind of articulating that this is something you should be thinking about rather than here's everything you need to do in order to rank on Google.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I actually think, technically, it's like essentially what you need is unique photos, right? You need like original images of the product, but you don't have to have the product in hand to do that, right? You could literally go on a manufacturer's site, take their images and then crop them, and then maybe, let's say it's a product family, for example, you make a Photoshop montage with multiple of them, then you re-encode it with you change the meta tags on them, and then you encode it with like, let's say it was PNG, you make it JPEG optimized for web 80% or something. So it's like a different encoding for the image as well. And then technically Google's going to see a different image,
I watched that in Matt Diggity's video on this as well. And
no,
that was the one thing I was
technically
thinking, I don't agree with that approach. Because it feels too much like it's something you're going to do just to like tick this box and like trick this level of the criteria. But I don't think that there's like people or algorithms going through and every post and saying, oh, has this been done? And let's compare it to the
it's going to be a tiny factor anyway. It's not going to matter.
It's more like an indicative factor, I think, this is my opinion, rather than something you have to
if you were thinking that Google is actually checking for images, that's one way of dealing with it though. So I don't disagree.
I would say what's more likely to happen is that people are more likely to engage and trust with your review if you have unique imagery.
And for sure. And you make more money as well.
Of like time on site, click-throughs, all that kind of stuff, which are positive. Maybe those do indirectly affect things.
But if you want me to give you a spoiler alert, we are actually doing that on one of our sites. You don't know about it, probably. Really? But like, we're not exactly that. I can't exactly give all the details on the podcast because that would give away the site. But there's one of our sites where we're talking about product families, right? So it's like it's a group of product. And so we have been photoshopping images that essentially show all the products within that family within one image, so that when we build like content hubs, for example, we have that section that talks about that category. Essentially, it shows all the products within that category. So it's kind of like useful as well to have that montage because people like see all the products in the family that we're talking about. before they click on the page that talks about that family, right?
That's different than photoshopping, a paintball gun into my hand and saying, "Hey, look,
No, that's
I
not what we're
reviewed
doing.
this," kind of thing.
But that's not what I meant either. What I meant is like you could just like crop a photo, for example, and maybe like just isolate the item in a clean way or something like that or whatever, without necessarily like lying and pretend like doing a shitty Photoshop that's super obvious, where it's like you paintball a fake hand, or like you put a fake hand over the paintball gun, etc. Like, so I'm saying you can just do this in a simple way where it's like it's just representing the product in a form of an image that has never been seen on the internet before, because it's a different crop, it's a different angle, whatever it is, So I don't think that's crazy to think about that. If you think it's a factor, it's not that crazy, I think.
If you do want to actually acquire products, and I know several sites that do buy all the products and photograph them, do videos and stuff, and they do really, really well. Not just because they do that and everything else is the same, but that's indicative of their editorial standards and generally very, very high. So their content performs well. But you can buy a product, in some cases refund it, send it back. There's questions about the morality of that.
How many times do they let you do that as well?
Certainly.
They let you do it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Amazon will ban you if you do that for every product
Exactly.
you buy. But you can certainly resell it. And I think I saw something in the US where you could like buy a product new on Amazon, take a photo of it, and then sell it back on Amazon. There was some like special way of doing it. I need to look into that more, but I feel like this is going to become more prevalent as time goes on. I've even seen some services which will buy the product for you in the US and take photos of it and then send them to you. So even if you're not physically in the US, it makes it a little bit easier for certain products. And of course, if you're doing digital products like courses or something like that, then you can you take screenshots and you'd be fine. That's why it's much easier. But on this point, they also said like show what's like physically or how it's used with unique content beyond what's provided by the manufacturer. And I think that if we take a paintball example, for example, you got a paintball marker or gun, and it has like a thing at the top where all the paint bullets go, a magazine, whatever you call it. Let's say that
Would you call yourself an expert on paintball?
No. Well, let's say, but it's just an example to highlight the point. Let's say one gun has a bigger magazine, holds 25% more, and that's something that the manufacturer says. You need to think like, okay, well, what does that actually mean in practice for someone who's using this? And you might, through your own experience of playing paintball, come up with some situations like, well, you can lay down suppressing fire for longer, or you're not going to get caught out reloading in a tight game at the end and lose. And use your experience to inform
you can
how
change your
that
strategy,
thing may affect it. So you're applying kind of critical sense to the situation and showing how a feature will actually be used in practice.
One review I did for Autoria Hacker that I think illustrates that, and that's not too long to watch, is the Link Whisper review I did. So if you guys want to check it out on which sites where we point at this one, I think.
Yeah.
If you guys want to check it out, we'll put a card here. But I made around a year ago, I made a review of Link Whisper. And same, I made a lot of like suggestions or features that I'm like, oh, in real life it doesn't work that well, or like I wish it did this, etc. And actually Spencer fixed a lot of things based on that review, which means that Link Whisper is a better tool now than it was when I did the review. So don't trust 100% what I say in the video, but it gives you an idea of what this means of like tying features to like real life situations, I think.
And often the manufacturer will actually sort of tie in some benefits or try and position some real situations. So maybe they'll be saying for the paintball gun, like, this will enable you to win more games at the end when it's down to the last man or whatever. But then you can use your experience to say, is that true? Like, how many games have you been in? When
how often does it happen, etc.
And providing that like objective, critical evaluation to the review. That's what really makes your review good, and I think satisfies that you're providing something unique beyond what the manufacturer is claiming.
One thing what Digity said in the video that I found made sense as well was he explained that like the sales page usually uses like flowery language that like is very it tells how great the product is, and it's like, oh, this is going to be an exceptional partner for your next paintball game, whatever, etc. Whereas a review would be more like, oh, in my experience, blah, blah. So the type of the lexical field of the words you're using, etc., tend to be quite different between a sales page and that. And I think that shit reviews tend to actually have this same kind of like flowery language talking about the product, and they always say it's great. It's always like 4.5 stars for some reason.
Yeah, one slightly negative thing just to appear that we're balanced, But it'll be like, oh, they have bad customer support or something which doesn't actually impact your usage of the product, so that you're more likely
I sneezed when I opened the box,
Yeah.
so it's like so it's like usually like they do that. So it's like, I think that's one thing that Google will be looking at as well. It's kind of like the way you're talking. Like, are you having real talk in your review, or are you just using the same salesy language that you would find on a sales page? And also, they could literally just check how close your language is to the one used on the sales page of the actual product. I don't think it's very hard for them to do, especially when you do reviews and you have schema. You essentially put the name of the product in the schema, right? So you give Google that data literally in a field that they can just pass, and then just look against the website that's selling it, and see how close you are. So I think that's what it is. And you do want to have that kind of like real talk, like the same way we're talking on this podcast now, right? We're trying to essentially take the sales page of the algorithm update and have a real talk about it, of like, how does this really change things in real life? That's exactly what's happening here. You need to do the same thing with your reviews,
The next point is on providing quantitative measurements on how a product measures up in various categories of performance. So this, if you do this, this shows that you have understood the situations when someone's likely to use a product. What are the main factors that you want to be assessing or looking at? With a paintball gun, that might be the range, like how far does it fire, or the firing rate, how many bullets per second or per minute, however that's measured. The weight, so how heavy it is to carry around, magazine capacity. I'm sure there's
pressure.
I'm sure there's a bunch of other things as well.
Have.
So where not so good reviews often are, where you can identify them as a not so good review, is that they don't do any of this, because that takes time, effort. You got to think about it. You got to do extra research, versus if you're just writing like a thin affiliate review, you can just kind of like rewrite a few things and, say, oh, it's kind of good, but kind of bad. Maybe, yeah, you should buy it. It's good. Whereas if you have to say, oh, it's good because of these factors, this factor, it has 6 of these, 5 of these, 22 of these, that is showing that you've really assessed the products. Not only that, but if you're doing a roundup review, then it gives you a much more solid basis for comparison across multiple products. And you can confidently say, well, I put this one number 1 because look, it fires much faster, holds more bullets, is lighter, and it shoots further. So
I remember the site we sold like almost 2 years ago now. It was software, and we literally spent weeks doing these kind of unique tests. Yeah. So then we would write all the best VS, etc. posts. Then we'd build data that we can reuse on multiple posts as well. So it's like we spent multiple weeks just gathering data on spreadsheets, actually testing the tools, etc. And then after that, we essentially like put all that data in every single review that compared these things. And depending on what that review was for, then we would recommend one product or the other, depending on which one was winning in the category that was the most important for the usage of the keyword that was targeted, So that's essentially what.
Now you've heard it. Honestly, like you say it all the time.
It's a shot game. Like, everyone start the podcast with a bottle of tequila, and every time I say essentially take.
Honestly, you said it like 50 times.
So I think it's a good idea to do that kind of approach, where, especially if you are playing your site in hubs. So when we tend to not just make one page about a product, right? So let's say we're going to pick a product category, let's say paintball guns again. What we'll probably do is we do the best paintball guns page. Then maybe we'll pick 5 or 10 best X for Y. So like maybe best paintball gun for, I don't know, kids, best paintball gun for distance shooting or something like this. So we just find a bunch of them, and we'll maybe do single reviews for all the products mentioned in all the roundup reviews, and maybe some VS if there is some VS keywords between the products we did. And we'll build a hub of maybe 20 pages. But the thing is, once you have planned that, you essentially have the list of of guns you're gonna be reviewing and so on. And so you can start then picking these categories and benchmarking these guns against each other on these categories. And then when you're gonna mention that gun, whether it's in a roundup review, a VS, a single review, etc., you will be able to refer back to the same metrics that you have been benchmarking, and you will be able to have very data-heavy reviews on many pages, and that's what justifies the time spent putting it together. It's like when you do it as a hub, and you get all these metrics for these products, but mention them in many pages and recycle the data pretty much, I would say. I think that's the best approach, because I think a lot of people will be looking at this, be like, oh, but why would I spend so much time for this one keyword? That's not the approach. The approach is like build a hub and write the articles that would mention that product, all of them. And so you can reuse that number or that data that you gathered many times, and then it's not so crazy in terms of research time per article if you've organized yourself properly.
Makes it much easier when you're writing all the other articles if you do that research up front. Otherwise, you can have to make it up as you go every time, which can almost take just as long as actually doing the research. So,
yep, it's
one of the benefits to focusing in, like, for an authority site.
All right, let's keep going, because this podcast is going to be long otherwise.
So the next point is it's kind of 2 points, but they're saying the same thing, I think. Explain what sets a product apart from its competitors, and cover comparable products to consider, or explain which products might be best for certain uses or circumstances. So explain what sets a product apart from its competitors, like the product positioning here. You're not going to get this from the manufacturer's site. Manufacturers don't say, hey, our product is better than this one, because they're all shit. They don't do this, because they get like sued and it's kind of slanderous. But as a independent third party who's writing a supposedly fair and balanced review, you have the right to be critical of things and say this is good and this is bad. I had bad experience with this, but good experience with that. You can do all these things, and people want to hear those things to make a informed choice about what the best product is. So I think most reviews, I mean, you should be doing this anyway, right? I don't know really why they had to stress it, other than it's like kind of obvious thing.
A lot of companies don't do that. Like we do that, we have that in our templates, etc. But again, a lot of these like Forbes, etc., they have an intro, 10 products not differentiated, and a conclusion, and then that's who they're talking to here. They're taking them, like a lot of good affiliates would do that. They'd be like, oh, best value for money, best overall, that's what it is, like in a roundup review, that's exactly what it is. But a lot of like really, really lazy big publishers just don't do that. They do a quick intro, a quick conclusion, and then a list of 10 products undifferentiated, and that's it, So it makes sense.
I think that if you really dig into it and understand like why this product is better than this one, then it helps you write a better review. But also, if you're doing roundup reviews, you kind of have to do that. It's like, how do we decide what the best paintball marker for beginners is? Well, we need to consider these things. And you can also apply, again, sort of like question what the manufacturer is saying in their claims. So maybe it has a 25% bigger magazine, but in your experience, do you need that? Does it make a difference? Or is it just going to add extra weight and get in the way of when you're ducked down, crawling around on the ground? There's a possibility. You always have to have your bullshit detector on high whenever you're reading a claim from a product manufacturer, because they have a vested interest in, marketing it to you, so you'll buy it, right? So I think it's just Google's trying to get across that you should be critical of those things here. The next point is discuss the benefits and drawbacks of a particular product based on research into it. Again, this sounds super basic.
Pros and cons. Yeah, exactly.
And I thought this was like just standard. Everyone would do this, but yeah, say good things, say bad things. Are they based on facts or not? Like, are they based on like real objective analysis that you're doing? Have you looked into it briefly? Or I don't know, do you just make it up? Is that there are people really doing that?
No, it's just because again, it's like I'm telling you, you're not looking at the shitty affiliate sites, not as much as I do, I think. And
you know what? Like, so we talked about this before, but there are a bunch of people who reviewed our courses and said, I think they gave us like 3 or 4 stars, said it was mostly good. And then they mentioned like one negative thing, which was always our support, which is like definitely the best in the industry, based on every conceivable metric. But I think one of them said that, and everyone else just kind of copied it. So they haven't done like discernible research into it, and then they happen to be promoting like another product, Wealthy Affiliate, instead. So, you know, read into that what you will. So maybe that's kind of like addressing
You just tell that story because you were pissed off, because I don't see how that connects that much. Okay, well, now you know, guys. It's like, usually that's the kind of stuff we don't share.
I think this is valid, because it's like, are you saying something bad about a product or service based on research into that? Or are you just regurgitating the common wisdom, which all the other affiliate reviews
I get it, but the point was like show the benefits and drawbacks, which is really the pros and cons, you know. It's like,
yeah, based on research.
Because a lot of big publishers, what they do, again, same thing, intro, quick description, but they don't really tell you what's good and bad about the product. Because you can't find it on Amazon. It is a valid
point why I was saying, and here's another example. So you say, oh, you know, this Toyota car is very reliable because it's a Toyota. Well, actually, not all Toyota cars are reliable. Toyota just happen to have a pretty good reputation when it comes to that. And certainly many of their cars are, but also many of their newer cars are not that reliable objectively when compared to other competitors. So I think it's saying you actually need to research this, not just kind of say common wisdom.
So don't use the brand image and things like that. Actually experience the product. To be frank, a lot of even like journalistic reviewers make that mistake too when they review products. So that tends to be something. But like, again, I'm questioning how Google is going to discern that when, for example, when for cars, everyone's gonna say, oh, Toyotas are reliable. So like, inside their search intent AI, Google's going to be like, Toyota equals reliable. And if someone says it's not reliable, you're essentially breaking against the search intent. Well,
this is, you're right about the search intent part.
I'm talking about technicalities, not the truth, you know?
Yeah. You're absolutely right in that. I think it's a real problem, not just because everyone's saying it, but in cases where people are saying it because they're heavily incentivized by money, i.e., affiliate programs which pay a lot of money, very high rates. They all have surprisingly really good reviews, and they appear on the top of all the roundup reviews as well.
Bluehost.
So you have to be. I think it's a really big challenge, and one of Google's biggest challenges over the next 5 years is to actually figure out who's talking nonsense. And not.
That's the problem. But like even in reviews of places, it's a problem on Google Maps as well, because like people have no taste for restaurants, and you end up in a shit restaurant because you had like 4-star reviews. Happens all the time too.
Yeah.
And so
I noticed that I went to Cyprus last year, and it was in this like really touristy place, and everywhere had like 4.3, 4.5 star reviews.
Yeah, it's all terrible, you know.
But then you went to like the main town where it was like all locals and stuff, and a 4.5 was like really good.
Yeah. So it's a problem. It's a problem with like online reviews in general, like and just people's standards, etc. But I think Google was just trying to be better than their competitors, and as long as their competitors didn't figure that out, it's not that big of a problem for them, you know. And that may be the case here. So I think while the intention of Google is for this to happen, which is like base your review based on experience, not on what you know about the brand, and essentially not researching and not experiencing. I highly doubt this is going to happen properly because of the way search intent works, and that in many cases, when you make a negative review of a product that is overwhelmingly well reviewed, you don't rank. quite simply, I've done that quite a few times, and you just don't rank. So I am very curious to see that. From my field experience, that's not how it works.
All right. Let's move on to the next one. It's describe how a product has evolved from previous models or releases to provide improvements, address issues, or otherwise help users in making a purchase decision. I think what this comes down to is company reputation. Like, who do you buy a commercial airliner from? Obviously Boeing or Airbus, because they have a lot of years of experience in producing good products that fly and are safe, and they've learned from experiences over the years, and they've kind of made improvements. That's all, I think, really important. And you apply that to a product like paintball goggles. If someone just slaps a visor on a bit of plastic and calls it some goggles, is it really going to be as good as the company who have went through 10 iterations of the same one, collected user feedback, iterated every time, improved it, and gotten better? The track record of how a product has developed, or even a brand has developed over the years, is important and should be somewhat of a weighted factor when you're deciding whether to
It's also based on
something.
products, on product models, like when there's a new version, etc. It's like a new version of a Toyota, for example. I think and I think it's not just addressing issues. For example, it would be like, oh, while Toyota is known to be a reliable brand, this model doesn't seem to be as reliable as the previous models. This thing fell apart during our test drive. We only drove 300 kilometers and we got this issue, for example, things like that. So it's like, I think it's from one model to the other as well, which is a lot of products you buy, there's a new version every year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. Like, for example, these headphones that we're using, they are 2 years old now. I would expect there's a refresh in 1 year, and there's going to be things that are better and worse. This version, for example, got much better microphones than the previous version, and the noise cancelling was slightly improved, and also there was a voice assistant button that is quite handy with your phone. So that would be like noticeable improvement compared to the previous version of the headphones of the same name, and so you need to highlight as well, which I think, to me, this is also a hint at like you should update your reviews when there's a new version of the product, and you should consider it's always been a factor, to be honest, but maybe it's something that will matter a bit more with these new changes, pretty much.
For digital products as well, this is even more important, especially for like a software as a service tool where you buy it and you're actually getting all the new updates just when they release them. You want to be saying, are they updating it? Is it going in a good direction? Do you like the product development strategy that they have from it? Are the new features worthwhile or fluffy or not? Or if you, shameless plug, happen to be buying Authority Hacker Pro and get free updates for life, how often is it updated and what are those updates? What's the kind of direction of that? That could be an important thing you want to take into consideration before purchasing, perhaps. So all that's to say that the history of a product and its updates are very important, and you should mention them and talk about them in your commercial content. Next one, identify key decision-making factors for a product's category and how the product performs in those areas. For example, they have this example of a car review, might talk about fuel economy, safety, handling, etc. This is basically the same as what the quantitative factors we mentioned earlier were, except it's stuff that can't be quantified, such as comfort. Is this pillow comfortable or not to sleep on? You can't really objectify that. You have to.
I think you need to give your feeling. That's when the real life experience is cool. Because like from the sales page, you can't tell how comfortable a car is, and so that's when like real life experience is going to prime on things. And like when I review tools, for example, like how a feature is described to work versus how it actually works in real life is often very, very different. Like it's buggy, or it doesn't give you enough results, it's not as useful as it's supposed to be, or like actually it's way better than the sales page described it, or something like this. And so you're able to like give that like real world feel, which I believe is what readers are looking for primarily from reviews, even though you might not need that to rank. And that's why I said like it can be a business decision to actually get all the products in hand just for that, because I believe you probably get a much higher conversion rate, and in the long run, you probably do a lot better, even though you're not making as much money initially, because you're spending money on buying products, reselling them, all that stuff. So it's things that you can't quantify and things you can't see when you don't have access to a product. If it's a software or something and you just need your computer, great. If it's a physical product, one lazy way to do that as well is to just go in a shop and see it in the shop and take photos in the shop and never buy the product, So that can be one way of like doing these kind of reviews as well. But you can go for a test drive of a car without ever buying it and review it, right?
That is how car reviewers review their cars.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't buy the car. When you're a big reviewer, they get provided by the manufacturer, but like otherwise you just go to a local shop and then local dealership and you just book a test drive. They might be pissed off, but if you don't want to buy the car, but maybe what you do is you give them a link in your review, so like they're happy you have their SEO or something, like kind of work out a deal like that. How like give them some hints on
that happens a lot of YouTubers who give tours of homes. They work with the real estate agent and say, hey, we'll do this cool video for YouTube. They
Yeah,
get
exactly.
free content and something to talk about on their channel. The real estate person gets a free tour video of the
Advertising,
property,
yeah.
which is great. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's like these kind of deals can be worked out. I know we have some members that did that. We have the member that did that with a local barbecue shop and just like borrowed items for a week even and brought them back and so on. But they knew about it. He didn't like refund and like sneakily bought it, etc. So yeah, that can be done. And I think you should, if these things become more important as ranking factors, then that's something to consider more and more with your sites. Last item, and then I have a question for you.
Final point was describe key choices in how a product has been designed and their effort on the users beyond what the manufacturer says. So this again is like, if a manufacturer says something, are they being honest in what they say? Is it actually useful? Like
call them out.
Call out bullshit when you see it.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to add a lot of trust to your review, but also to provide value from the point of view of someone deciding whether they actually want to purchase it or not. A good tactic here is to do keep asking so what. Like if an audio cable has gold-plated connectors, the manufacturer says to increase connectivity, you ask, well, so what? What does that mean? Does it actually make any difference whatsoever, or is it just a kind of fluffy thing? If it does make a difference, then what does that mean? Well, you maybe get, again, I don't know if this is true or not, so I'm just making this up here, but you may maybe get less audio degradation when playing live on your guitar or whatever. So what does that mean? Well, you sound more professional. So what does that mean? Well, you can be confident when you're playing in front of other people, or you just look cooler, sound cooler. I don't know. But constantly going. You
convinced me. I get it.
Constantly going through those asking those so what question will force you to evaluate not only what the manufacturer says, but what they want you to infer from what they're saying as well.
Yeah. Don't have anything to add on this one. It's pretty self-explanatory. But I have a question. Based on all of these, how much do you think the templates in H Pro were in phase with this? Like, are you happy with the work we've done inside with the stuff we've been showing in H Pro based on what Google is expressing in that blog post?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, but you probably shouldn't trust me because like I have a vested interest in saying that.
No, I think we've done a lot. I mean, a lot of good affiliates were doing a lot of this stuff already. It's not just like in H Pro, right? It's like good quality affiliate sites. They were doing the pros and cons. They were comparing to other products. They were, trying to get good quality imagery for their reviews. They were trying to rate different aspects in a numbered way so that it's like fact-based, etc. So I really like the idea. I don't think it's necessarily true in real life yet, but I like the idea of what they're going for here. Because really it's gonna make reviews an actual job, like an actual specialty that you can just jump in and just go on Text Broker and just put the keyword and get a review written, and if you're a DR90 site, you just end up ranking over people who try a bit harder. And that, I think, while it might be making things shaky in the short term, will probably give you more space in the long run, because if it's more difficult to do, it means less people will do it. And if less people will do it, which means that the traffic that exists will be split among less people, which means these people will get more traffic and hopefully make more money, So I do hope it gets harder. I do think the content that is ranking these days for a lot of major consumer item queries is terrible. And I hope, because I haven't seen it yet, that sites like Forbes, etc., that really put shit reviews online do get punished. Not punished, but like they at least have to try harder and put more resources behind it. Because if they have to put more resources behind it, even though they will probably figure it out eventually, it changes their calculation. Because imagine, like, because of all the costs, etc., like if let's say a review costs them like $600 these days, maybe a review would cost them after this, if they were implementing all of this, like $2,000 to $2,500, right? Then the calculation for like which keywords they go after changes quite a bit, and they will only maybe go for the really big keywords and do a good job there and be competitive. But then they will leave more medium and smaller keywords free because it's just not monetarily viable for them. Well, it is for you as a small publisher, and it just essentially essentially gives you some space as a smaller publisher to still have good traffic on Google and make a living and do quite well, basically. So that might be for the best, this change. Even if some people went down with this update, I actually hope they make it even harder.
I want to add that if you are currently down from this, then wait until it plays out until you do take any action. We don't know if this is the only thing that's going on, or maybe there's other kind of updates going on at the same time. Don't jump to too many conclusions just yet. But if you have been affected by it, I've seen almost everyone who I've seen talk about this, at least at length, who's been negatively affected, say that they have good content, but they don't really go into much more detail than that. I think most people these days think that they have good content if it's written by
most people think they're smarter than the average,
but perhaps it's actually not. So I would encourage you first to take a long, hard look at that. And no doubt there will be people who genuinely do have awesome content that get caught up in this negatively somehow. In which case, I'm sorry for making that assertion, but it's something you need to really, really sort of question, because I don't think enough people are being honest with themselves about the quality of the content. I mean, we have some bad content on some of our sites, particularly some of the older stuff that was written. So go back and look at the earlier stuff, especially.
Yeah. Any final words of wisdom?
Yes, I just want to explain a little bit about what's actually in Authority Hacker Pro for those people who are not familiar with it. As Gael mentioned, it's our most advanced training course. This is aimed for people who already have a website, who are already making money and want to grow that further. So we teach people who have mostly content-based websites how to do all aspects of blogging, scaling your content team, link building. We've got a new on-page SEO blueprint, which is just been released. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what's in that, Gael?
Yeah, I mean, feature snippets. So I show how to get feature snippets live, and how to I open some of our sites and just go ahead and try to get some feature snippets. There is a lot of advanced article kind of brainstorming for search intent, etc. So it's trying not to be on page SEO, put your keyword in your title tag, it's trying to be for search intent for all these new core updates, for all this stuff, etc. So it's a little bit more advanced, and it's ending up being a lot of videos. So it's being produced now. I have more videos coming after the launch, but it's going to be a big one, and so far pretty good returns. So people
I think the way you said it to me at the start was most on-page SEO information is here's a list of factors, but your one's more here's what you should actually do to see results.
I mean, Authority Hacker Pro is actually doing stuff in real life, right? It's I think at the beginning we had PowerPoints, but I don't think they exist anymore. I don't have any video on PowerPoint on So it's I'm opening WordPress, or I'm opening a template that we have or something. I'm just doing it and showing people. I'm hey, download the template below, etc. So it's it's practical, right? And if you've seen some of my YouTube videos, that real YouTube videos, not podcasts, on the YouTube channel, you get a bit of a taste of what it's going to be. So if you want, check the Revive content video, or how to find easy effect keywords video, for example, that gives you a bit of a taste of what it looks like inside.
And there's over 350 odd of these videos, and more coming out every other week at the moment. We have a pretty big publishing schedule this year. Yep. There's a new link building blueprint coming out next month, or the first part of it will be released next month, I believe. And you'll notice on the podcast, actually, over the last sort of 6-12 months, we've had a lot more guests, especially from the link building community, who have different ideas and cool ideas about outreach and PR and that kind of stuff. So we'll be talking a lot more about that stuff now that we've put a lot of it into practice and on our own sites. So that's coming as well. When you join H Pro, you get free updates for life. So you buy it once and that's it, you're in, which is a pretty good deal if you happen to have picked it up for a couple $100 when it first came out.
I think some people are pretty happy.
Yeah. So it's available now. There's a Facebook community, private Facebook community as well, which you get access to, where you can chat to us, ask us questions, and there's all sorts of other tips. And
there is no way you describe everything, Mark. People just go on authorityhacker.com/pro. check the sales page, and you see everything that you need to see. It's really a lot of stuff. So go check it out. Anyway, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. If you're not subscribed yet, 50% of people are not subscribed. And like the video, and drop us a comment if you enjoyed this episode, and tell us if you've been affected by this update, if you went up, if you went down. I'm quite curious to see, where our community is standing at. The Pro people, some people went down, but a lot of people went up as well. So it's kind of a mixed bag at this point. So I am quite curious. Thank you for listening. Have a good week. See you later.
There's a lot of stuff on there which you probably are doing
already.
Yeah.
No?
Let me just say that again. I couldn't get the word out. I knew what I wanted to say.
Okay.